If you're going to design games, it helps to understand a little bit about what makes games enjoyable. Publishers often say in their guidelines for designers, game must be fun, but I've always found this to be pretty much useless because fun means different things to different people. So I then have to write to the publisher and say, okay, what do you mean by fun? And there are games that even avid players would not call fun. I've made a habit of asking gamers who like to play chess whether they regard it as fun, and about half do and about half don't. It may be engaging, it may be enjoyable, it may be fascinating, but it's not fun for them. So I like to use the terms enjoyable or interesting. I think that fun comes from the people you play games with and the circumstances. So you can have fun playing Monopoly even though Monopoly itself is a really dull game and not well designed. Certainly there are games that are intended to be funny, often party games, but that's funny, not fun. So we can still ask, though, why do people enjoy some games more than others? Well, one theory about this derives from the flow. A Czech researcher who works in the United States identified the positive aspects of human experience: joy, creativity, the process of total involvement with life, I call flow. For game purposes, people have an optimal experience when they are challenged but not challenged too much. And this slide, which follows a diagram from one of his books, shows what that means. If somebody has low skills in the game and the challenge is high, they're going to be anxious because they're not going to succeed at all. On the other hand, if they're very skillful and there's not much challenge in the game, they're going to be bored because it's too easy. You want people to be in that flow channel where the challenge matches the skills. Well, that can be done with levels. In Dungeons and Dragons, in a dungeon with levels, the deeper you go, the tougher it is. So as your characters get better, you go deeper into the dungeon. It doesn't make much sense from a open quote realistic point of view, but it works. And the same thing is done in video games. As you play the video game and you become more skilled and your character gains capabilities, the levels become more and more difficult. This keeps players in the flow. Games have been characterized as learning in a safe environment. Players learn and they become better as they play the game. And so the game has to adjust. If it's a video game, then the people who design the video game have to adjust the challenge. If it's a tabletop game, then if the player is playing with other people who are also getting better at the game, then the challenge will increase. But you need to have variation in this. If you design a game so that no matter how good the player gets, it's always hard, or no matter how good the player gets, it's always easy, it's going to become tedious. What you want is to vary the challenge so that sometimes there's a lot of tension because it's difficult, and sometimes the player can relax because it's relatively easy. So you want ups and downs in games just as in life, because that makes the ups more delicious. Now, having said all that, some people have tried to identify different kinds of fun or enjoyment in games, and one of the most well-known of these is 8 Kinds of Fun from Mark LeBlanc, which are listed here. And if you look at these, you can see that some of these are in some games and not in others, and probably none of them are in every game. So when you're choosing a target audience for your game, ask yourself which kinds of fun of this sort your target audience likes and try to incorporate that into your game. For example, discovery is an obvious one. Some games have a considerable exploration segment or capability, and others don't. Fellowship, well, that usually requires a lot of people. Some games have that, some don't. A game is obstacle course. Some games are obstacle courses, some games are puzzles, which is a different thing. Jigsaw puzzles, for example. Narrative, I'd prefer to call that story because to me narrative is something else, but some games have stories and some don't. And by that I mean a story that's imposed by the designers. There's always the story, or rather the narrative of what happens as the player plays the game, even if it's an abstract game that's like chess that has no story to it. No, this is a story that's imposed by the designer. Fantasy is make-believe, game is sense-pleasure, game is a soapbox for expression, games is a mindless pastime. That's pretty popular nowadays. A lot of games, when you come down to it, are just time killers. Another point of view is Nicole Lazzaro's 4 Keys to Fun. So, 4 kinds of fun that are important in games. And the first of those is fiero. Triumph over adversity. Overcoming obstacles, reaching goals, devising strategies that succeed. Another is curiosity, which can involve exploration, fantasy, as in fantasizing, and creativity. Another is relaxation and excitement, or serious fun. And the fourth is people fun, amusement. Those party games, for example. But not just party games, cooperative games, lots of different kinds of games. There are other ways to look at fun or what's enjoyable in games. This just introduces you to some of the more common ones.